And most of the others are still on the other. Oh. So I was thinking it's there used to be all around. Yeah, you go. Of course, everyone over us. All of that. Oh, I see that. Yeah, it'll be a slot. When she can get trained, they're that's going to be and to tell you the power of being better learners, people come in and out, so they bring the coffee in here, they go I'm gonna ignorant we are every time they go they're working swing out of 10, which they only this. And people days and now they got it's really yes, what's the other stuff? Yeah. Hold on. So everything keeps us. Anyway, you gave us so they have all of it. We had a 10 in the Bible. So it's 50 minutes. Yeah, and I should ask you. Good morning. You're the first person today. Said all kinds of things you can run. That is only the most. Where is it? I can help you about. Good morning. Sure, but we had. Good morning, John. Definition of. Great, yeah, great. You don't need, so we're not going to talk about it as well. Yeah, I get. There are bottomers that we also describe the different kind of belts. So, can we just pass along? He's on the committee. Oh, okay. Yeah, I think, John, if you point, all right, Jen. He probably knows a few things about it, yeah. I better turn off my phone. Yeah, he couldn't get it either. That's my stuff, just won't go there, that's fine. Sally was the first docent at the Minneapolis Institute of Art.
Oh, my goodness.
And the longest, how long? Not the first, part of the first class. The big program. We were one of the initial program people. Yeah. And what year was that? 1966.
So is it Friends of the Minneapolis Institute?
Yeah.
But, yeah, we love it.
And how long did you work as a docent? When did you retire?
I retired in 2011, 46 years.
46 years as a docent. Good morning.
I love doing that so much. I was an artist for page for a long time. Fulfilled something.
I was one of those school pictures. Somebody was learning, yeah, 8 to 10 pieces of art, and you know, I
Oh, okay. Keep that in mind. You get it, well, you got it for sure. Good. Good, good.
Morning, everyone. Yeah, front row seats, pretty, yeah. Gift with purchase.
I realized the other year I never retired nurse practitioner. Oh, I did not know that. I did not know that. And John here runs the Habitat for Humanity program with one of. Oh, you did? Oh, okay. All right. You're still doing it, Tony? Okay.
When did Habitat start?
That's John Humphrey.
There's lots of bills.
It was definitely going away. I became a member in 2004. So we were going over for a while.
And you don't meet that anymore?
No.
It's like co-partner in crime with Allison. Rebecca Hayward.
She won't fell.
Nice to meet you.
You know, one reason I'm interested in bills is I was a member of House of Hope Presbyterian Church in St. Paul.
Yeah.
And they had such a marvelous carillon.
49 bells.
Wow.
You know,
Have you been up in the tower now?
oh, it's long.
It's like this. And the only way those was to get one of those by being up there.
Come on. And there was one man, I mean, this would have been back about
Yes.
and they had a carillon,
Carolyn Murphy.
Sure.
and he'd been there for a long time.
Okay, great. Thank you. So,
And I also sang in the choir.
Cody? Yeah. The service is going a little long today.
Friday afternoon.
Yes, it's going very, very long. Yes. So I just got a text message that the sermon's not done. Right. So it's, yeah, it's about 20 minutes. Can we wait until 5?
And every summer.
Yeah. Do you want to step up to the microphone and say that to me?
Volunteer and you're online and you just listen. And he plays just a
House of Hope.
So they can sit on the bench.
Don't worry, John, I'm the only one online right now.
So don't say it?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, I'm not saying anything. Okay.
so yes, future today, there's a 9 o'clock service and 11 o'clock service. The 9 o'clock service is supposed to end at 10. Preacher is still preaching there.
Sounds good.
Good morning. We're starting a little late today because the early service just got out. There's a guest minister who is apparently speaking a long time. So today, our speakers are Rebecca Jorgenson Sundquist and Don Hall. They are founders of an organization called City of Bells. It's a 5-year-old nonprofit that identifies, coordinates, repairs, and celebrates bronze bell installations in our community. Rebecca fell in love with bells when she shepherded the 47-bell carillon at Central Lutheran Church in downtown Minneapolis. Don Hall is a community leader and visionary who takes joy in promoting the wonderful assets of our community. So I'll turn it over to them.
Good morning, and thanks for being here. This is actually our first kind of formal presentation about bells. So thanks to Larry Johnson, who's been a longtime friend of Don and Marion. I want to introduce you to Marion Hall, too, as part of our team. And I understand Larry does a lot of good work here at your church, and he was the conduit, so we're grateful for that. But this is something that we'd like to do more of, too. We'd like to get the word out because we fell in love with bells. And I'd like Don to say a few words about how this all started. So please welcome Don Hall.
Thank you. I'm short. I think it started when the Basilica cleaned up its exterior about in the early 2000s. Do you remember that? And it was this gleaming marble building, just looked magnificent. And now, of course, it's getting dirty again from freeway smog and so on. But I looked at it and I thought, boy, this is just magnificent, and it's so prominent right there by the freeway. It makes it look like a Catholic city. But Minneapolis isn't really a Catholic, it's more of a Lutheran city. And where's the equivalent Lutheran presence? So I looked around at the various churches downtown and took some pictures, and there was Central Lutheran, also magnificent structure with really good, spectacular stained glass windows. And I looked at it, and here's this great edifice with a little dinky steeple on top, like somebody thought, well, we got to put a stick up there or something, you know. And I took some pictures of various churches, and I wrote a little write-up, and I gave it to Central Lutheran and said, you know, this is really architecturally incomplete. Churches, of course, shouldn't compete, but it would be important for the city to have a nice Lutheran presence, calling attention to itself. And it would architecturally fit with the building, I think. So you should build a bell tower or a steeple or something. But we didn't just give them advice. My wife and I offered to donate some money to do a feasibility study. And so they brought it up to one of the church council meetings, and I've been told that this has happened frequently over the years. Somebody stood up and said, you know, when the church was built, it was intended to have a bell tower, and the foundation was laid at the time. But the bell tower was never completed because the Depression came along and we didn't have the money. But we still have the plans. And so the pastor there put me in touch with Rebecca. She was in charge of fundraising at the time. And all of a sudden, I guess, she should tell this, not I, a gentleman came to the church and said, I'd like to do something for the church, for the founders of the church. And she said, well, how would you like to build a bell tower? I think that's the way it went. And he said, yeah, that'd be fine. That'd be really a nice idea. And then we started on that. And then she said, how would you like to put in carillon bells so they can play a full melody, not just chimes or tolling? He said, yeah, that would be fine. And he wants to remain anonymous, but he ended up donating, I think, $4.5 million, maybe $5 million worth of construction and so on at Central Lutheran. Well, I lived in South Minneapolis, and a neighbor a couple blocks away, I only knew him casually, he came by walking down the sidewalk one day. He said, "Aren't you the guy that did something over there at Central Lutheran?" I said, "Yeah." And we started talking, and he said, "We should keep that idea going. That's really good. We got to celebrate bells." And I said, "Yes, and we got to include Rebecca, because she likes the idea too." And I heard her once use the phrase "city of bells." She'd like to make this community a city of bells and celebrate our bells. And so we decided to form a little group. And I'm just going to read the first paragraph of our Articles of Incorporation. I won't bore you, but it tells how we got going. This was written in 2016, so just 7 years ago. City of Bells is a public charity association. It's really a 501c3, whose activity, revenue, and assets are dedicated solely to the stated mission: the discovery, education, promotion, ringing, and, if necessary, restoration of bell installations intended for public enjoyment. Activities will take place principally in Minneapolis-St. Paul, an area with unique, parentheses, carillon, bell installations, which the association believes should be coordinated, enhanced, and celebrated, perhaps in common concert. Membership will be composed of no less than 3. That's what it says in the articles. There will be no discrimination. There will be no compensation paid to officers or other members, but we can be reimbursed for expenses. It is anticipated there will be no staff, but we can hire contract activity as necessary. Initial officers are the following: Rebecca Jorgenson Sundquist, President; Joe Bjordahl, Vice President; Donald Hall, Treasurer; Linda Holman, Secretary. These articles were adopted in 2016. And so I think that's a brief summary of how we came to be. And then I had the thought this morning, coming over here, maybe I should take some pictures of Plymouth here. I notice you don't have a bell tower. But Philip Brunel told me once, some years ago, that the reason you don't have bells is because when the church was established, there was concern that they would disturb the cows pasturing nearby. And then I found out you do have a handbell choir, so you do measure up just fine, I think. That's our initial history.
Don, thank you. I count Don and Marion as great friends. We never would have met had it not been for Don's chutzpah, driving up 35W, looking at Central and thinking this is a Lutheran town, not a Catholic town. So lots of adventures along the way, including a trip to Annecy, France, where we watched them cast the bells at Central. When we went to Annecy, Central was going to have 23 bells. A day after we got back, we had 47 bells. So talking to the donor who said, I said, you know, we heard bells that carillons had 70 bells. He said, oh, we don't have enough. Let's move up. Let's do 47. So a lot of times, you know, gifts of bells are legacy gifts that families like to give to their churches in honor, in memory of people. So it's been a lot of fun learning those stories too. We have some interesting slides we want to share with you today, but first off, I just want to read a little background about bells and what drives us. Bells have been used, as you know, in a variety of ways for thousands of years. In cities, towns, villages around the world, they've been used for religious purposes, calling people to prayer in temples and pagodas, shrines and churches, and they still do that in cities across America today. Since bells began ringing, they've been used to call people together for important public occasions too. They've rung to mark the end of war, celebrate the coming of peace. They've been sounding the alarm and summoning people to respond in crisis and calamity. Bells have rung out the passage of time, marking the hours for the people, calling people to work and to school, telling citizens that the day has begun and that the day has ended. Bells have been around, have become a part of our sound of public memory. On days of historic significance for a nation or a city, bells have reminded people of the achievements of the past or recalled for them important moments in the progress of national or local history. In America, our bells have rung on Independence Day and Veterans Day. They've sounded our gratitude on Thanksgiving Day, and they have helped us mourn on September 11th and other days when we have paused to remember pain and loss. In American cities, bells have finally begun ringing on Juneteenth, June 19th, to celebrate the day of emancipation of enslaved African Americans. Bells perform important civic functions. They signal our oneness as a people, reminding us of our capacity to be united. Even though in many ways we're not united, but they stir our hearts to redouble our commitment to the American ideals of freedom and justice for all. All of this by the sound of a bell. So I've passed around some of our bells, so you've had a chance to feel and touch them. And let's start with some slides. Cody's been really helpful to me, and I'm not the most tech-savvy person, but we're going to do this together, right, Cody? So let's go back to the page, Cody, that has early bell history. Okay, boy, I'm an expert now. Okay, you might look at this slide and think we're going to be here for 4 days, Rebecca, but this just gives you a little bit of background. Early bell history. Earliest bells were made in China about 3000 BCE. Bells were relatively small, were used as decoration, calls to prayer, and other forms of communication. Large bells in the West, used to call Christian people together to worship in the 4th century. Pope Fabian officially sanctioned bells for this purpose in 604 CE. By the early Middle Ages, large bells were common in Europe and Near East. Bells were cast from bronze, as they are today, a mixture of about 20% tin and 80% copper. Bell foundries became common, especially in the Netherlands, Belgium, France, and England. Meanwhile, in America, Paul Revere opened his bell foundry about 1792 in Boston. Andrew McNeely began casting bells in 1826 in Troy, New York. Then Stucksteed, McShane, Van Dusen, and Tift going further west. So at one time, there were many bell foundries in the United States. Not so much anymore, but some of the earliest bells in the Twin Cities came from these bell foundries. Here's the anatomy of a bell. So you can see there's many different components or many different places that a bell foundry needs to pay attention to when they're building and making these bells. And if you held any of the bells that I passed around, you can see the various components. I also want to point out there's a little brochure that we handed out. There is, in the middle section, there are some definitions of components of bells. There are clappers, peals, carillon, and bourdon. So you can get better acquainted with bell terminology. Carillons and chimes. The first tuned bells were used to play melodies in 1644 in the French Netherlands. A carillon has 23 or more tuned bells. They tune them by shaving the metal and tuning them that way. When we were in Annecy, France, they had a padded room that they would put the bells in, and they would just shave it and keep the process going until they were tuned to the note that they wanted. A chime has 8 to 22 tuned bells. A bourdon or a tenor is the largest bell in the set of bells. So the weight will be different for each carillon or each bell installation, but the lowest note is always called the bourdon. Melodies are played manually from a keyboard or from a mechanical playback system. Sally and I were talking before we started here about the bells at House of Hope on Summit Avenue in St. Paul. That's the largest installation in town. They have 49 bells. The only way those bells can be played is climbing 106 very steep steps up about 150 feet to the tower. But it's worth the trip, right, Sally, when you get up there? Yeah. Okay, one thing that we were not successful with today is getting some sound effects for you. So we're going to skip this slide, but we're going to tell you at the end where you can hear all these bells. Okay, change ringing. Have any of you heard of the change ringing bell process before? It's quite different than pulling a rope to ring a bell or having a carillon instrument. Change ringing includes 3 to 12 bells that are rung according to a mathematical formula or a change. Most common is 6 to 8 bells. I don't know of any change ringing installations in the Twin Cities, although we have talked with a church in St. Paul who's interested in having a change ringing program. They developed in England in the 1600s. It requires as many individual ringers as there are bells that you want to ring. And if you look at a sheet of music for change ringing, it's very different than looking at piano music or choral music, but it's interesting. The change ringing figures into the plot of The Nine Tailors, a mystery by Dorothy Sayers. So traditionally an English form of bells, beautiful. If you Google change ringing, you'll hear some beautiful bells. We have a slide of University of Chicago. We were going to play a tune here, but this just shows that there are fabulous bells all over the United States. And a lot of college campuses will have them, as well as churches. There was a new installation in Florida recently. It was at a university. And using totally different and new technology, I think it's like 69 bells. It's just in the tower, and the architecture around it is just amazing. So there is still a love of bells, and there's people who are willing to give the money to make it happen. Okay, Don talked a little bit about Central and how the bells got started there. There are 47 bells. They were installed in 2005. They rang for the first time on Christmas Eve. And then on Palm Sunday in 2006 is when we had the dedication concert, and we commissioned a piece by Stephen Paulus. The whole Minnesota Orchestra came over. It was a grand celebration. At the end of that dedication, I mentioned that all the other bells in town welcomed the Central Lutheran bells, and that was a little bit of the seed of the idea for us to have a city of bells, to get all these bells organized. Because I didn't realize at the time that Minnesota, and particularly the metro area, have more bell installations than any other city in the United States. So that, to me, signals that we need to do something about that, put us on the map and celebrate that. The heaviest bell, or the bourdon bell at Central, is 5,000 pounds. And if you played the note on the piano, if you hit middle C, that's the note that the bourdon is tuned to. And then the smallest bell is 17 pounds. So some of the bells at Central are ringing, more of them are, they can ring like you think of a traditional bell ring. Many of them are stationary, so it's operated mechanically. That too has a staircase, I think 160 steps, but because that's a newer installation, OSHA is all over it, and it's a very safe walk up there, and you can have tours probably any day of the week. You just call ahead and get a tour. The Central bells can be played manually or via an electronic playback system. Central also has summer carillon concerts. You can pull up a chair on the... I'm going to leave this slide up here. Carillon is a carillonneur. As you can imagine, we don't have a lot of carillonneurs in the country. University of Michigan has a part-time program. There just aren't a lot of places where you can learn to be a carillonneur study. So a lot of it is people mentoring each other and passing it down that way. But it's a little bit of a concern because, especially in Minnesota, we've got millions of dollars worth of bells, and we need to make sure that we're training up people that know how to play them and know how to take care of them. That's the other piece too. Okay, so I call this the Bell Wars. Westminster now is on the scene, and they want bells. You know, they built that beautiful addition, and they decided to do a 6-bell peal. And can you tell me the name of the peal that they did? Westminster chimes is there. 6 bells. They too chose to go with the Picard Foundry in Annecy, France, and the largest bell, the bourdon, weighs 10,000 pounds. It's about the size of a small car. It's gorgeous. Have any of you heard the Westminster bells? Go make sure you hear them on a Sunday. I think they ring every day at noon too. But they're just stunning. All the bells can swing or they can be struck by a mechanical clapper when stationary. If you ever see Tim Hart Anderson, he loves to pull the clicker out of his pocket and say, I can be in Africa and I can get those bells ringing. So he's quite fond of that capacity. And as senior pastor, he's the one who can do that. That was just a wonderful day watching those bells get installed. The late architect, James Dayton, designed not only the addition, but it was his design for the design of the structure that had the bells. And I think he built models, let's see if I can get this clicker, well I can't, of that structure. It was in his dream too that Westminster would have bells, and that would be the crowning touch of their new addition. City of Bells really started our work with St. Mark's Cathedral. St. Mark's has a carillon of 24 bells. Their bells had been in disrepair, and as you know, as it goes with church budgets, it often isn't a priority to repair the bells. You have to keep them up, and but that's something that often can be put on the wayside. So one of the first projects that City of Bells did was to raise money so that they, along with donors from their church, could get the bells repaired. So that was in 2005, I think, Don, and that got us started. And I told the board, I said, well, let's call the Star Tribune and see if they'll do a story and, you know, start people talking about bells. So here was the story in June of 2015. Well, lo and behold, the Today Show picked it up, and I got a call from Harry Smith saying, we'd like to come out and do a story about your City of Bells and what you're doing about bells. Well, we had one project, you know. So, but anyway, it was quite delightful. They sent TV crew out in the fall when they actually dedicated the bells, and then he came back in December and did a little bit of a tour of bells in town. And Myra, I'll send you the link and you can pass that around. But it was just a terrific story about bells. And I thought, well, Don, we're in this now. We're really committed to doing bells. It's all over the country. So St. Mark's, 24 bells. These two they came in 3 different installments. Legacy gifts honoring members. They too decided to go with the Picard Foundry. The largest bell they have is 5,000 pounds. 4 of the bells can swing, and they can all be operated by a mechanical clapper. I love pulling up to that intersection by the Walker and Loring Park and there, because they ring their bells on the hour. I think they used to ring them on the quarter hour too, but it's just roll down your window when you get to that intersection. You can hear some beautiful bells. Very prominent location there. St. Olaf Catholic Church. They have 9 bells from 1882. They were cast by the McNeely Foundry in Troy, New York. They were originally in the Redeemer Universalist Church. They were placed in the St. Olaf Tower in 1954. The largest bell is E flat above C on the piano, so if you can visualize that, and they can be played via computer. The other interesting thing about St. Olaf's is if you can go on the Skyway and look into their bell structure. So it's probably the closest you can get to seeing their bells. Mm-hmm. So they too are part of our kind of inner team of downtown churches with bells. Okay, let's go to City Hall. Most of you are probably familiar with City Hall bells. 15-bell chime from 1896 to 1924 and 1924. It just speaks to the durability of these bells. They're practically indestructible. It's just amazing. Originally played mechanically, converted to electric in 1971. The largest bell, middle C, B flat below middle C on the piano, and it weighs 7,300 pounds. They have a teeny tiny keyboard that is played in the lobby. It looks like a typewriter. And sadly, the longtime carillonneur Tony Hill, who's also on our board, passed away recently. He had a tour up into the bell tower and touched the bells, etc. There isn't anybody who knows more about those bells and the music that it can play than Tony. So we're really grieving his loss. He was an incredible gift, not only to our board, but to the whole city of Minneapolis. He was wonderful. The interesting thing about City Hall bells is that a couple of them are pretty out of tune. But because of the way the tower is built, you see these structures here? The bell is too big to get out of those. So they'd have to knock out part of the structure. They'd have to have a huge crane in the middle of the city in order to get a couple of those bells out. So don't listen too closely. They're glorious bells. They're just not perfectly in tune. So. And City Hall bells, under Tony's leadership, played every noon, and they did special concerts for different occasions. Basilica, 5 bells installed in 1985, and their 5 bells are close to the front. But they also have one bell that's way in the back of the church in another tower that was brought over from a predecessor church, and they're hoping that they can get that bell ringing again too. Their bells are also by the Picards. Largest bell, 6,600 pounds. Smallest one weighs 1,500 pounds, which is still significant. And there again, if you're at that intersection, roll down your window because it's just a beautiful sound. I love going by there on a Saturday because they typically do 2 to 3 weddings on Saturdays. And it's just glorious when you hear the bride, you hear the bells and you know the bride and groom are going to be coming out. Their bells are rung electronically via computer-controlled system. Here we are at House of Hope Presbyterian Church. Their carillon started in 1923 with 23 bells from Belgium. It was enlarged over the years and now contains 49 bells. So this speaks to the fact that you can start out with a handful of bells by one company, and you can get more bells from another company, and they can tune them and they can coordinate. It can just go on and on. The largest bell weighs 5,280 pounds. The smallest is 11 pounds. And I think I mentioned that they have summer carillon concerts Sunday afternoons at 4 o'clock. You take your chair and sit in the back and bring a bottle of wine and listen to bells. And they play all kinds of music.
What does it mean that they can only be played manually?
It means the carillon instrument looks much like, it's a cross between an organ and a piano. So they have the foot pedals like an organ does, and then they have 2 manuals. The keys look like levers. I think we'll have a picture in here. The carillonneur, it takes quite a bit of strength, but they wrap 2 fingers together in something that looks like a bandage. And that's how they play. The feet is much like an organist would play the organ. But you can see that the music for the carillon pieces is different. than you would see for a choral music or piano music or even organ music. I'll see if there's a picture in here you can see how they... Okay, Cathedral of St. Paul. 5 bells were installed in 1985. They too chose the Picard foundry. Largest bell is the C above middle C, and those bells are played electronically. They've been doing quite a bit of work on their bells over the last few years. A few years ago, they were poised to do a big installation, adding about 50 bells. And then I think with COVID and the economy, they backed off on that. But that is their dream. And of course, the incredible presence they have in St. Paul would be just stunning to have that many bells. So we'll keep you posted on that one. Are any of you familiar with St. Louis, King of France? A jewel of a church downtown St. Paul. They have a carillon of 24 bells installed in 1994. I think that the book sitting next to Don talks about their bells. They named all of their bells. In this program, they're all named after saints. The program shows the weight of each one. And then, of course, it made it possible for individual donors to name one of the bells. So I'll pass this along. But St. Louis, King of France is known for the wonderful organ concert series that they do. I think they're on Wednesdays at noon, and they go for about a half hour. And oftentimes they include the bells in that too. So we say city of bells, but what we're really talking about are cities of bells. We count us as one team, so to speak. Just a jewel of an installation in a church. How many of you know about the Minnesota Liberty Bell? This is a great story. In the 1950s, after World War II, the Treasury Department wanted to promote treasury bonds, so they worked with the Picard Company to do a replica of the Liberty Bell. They made 57 bells. Each of the bells weighs 2,050 pounds, and every state in the country and territories has a Liberty Bell. Most of them have never been played. And so when City of Bells got organized, we worked with the legislature to get the wooden framework taken off around the bell. It was enclosed in that framework so nobody would play it. I suppose they were concerned about vandalism. But it's on the campus of the state capitol. It's adjacent to the Veterans Affairs building. If you're standing at the bell looking towards the Capitol, it's just a great shot. You can see some of the other sculptures over there, et cetera. But, so what City of Bells started doing is organizing community bell ringing, and we do a little service at the Liberty Bell. You play it with a rope, old-fashioned rope. We've been through a number of ropes because they break, but it's been great fun. We've been doing this for about 5 years now. I think Governor Walz was one of the first people who presided at a program. Philip Brunel put together a choir and some bells from your church that came over July 4th one year, I think was that the date they were there. We've had a number of senior pastors from around the city come, and then civic leaders. I'm trying to think of the name of the gal who, during COVID, we had the woman who headed up the health department. Jan Malcolm. Jan Malcolm had words to say. We've had Kids Ring. We've had League of Women Voters come over, do programs. So Jesse Ventura came one year. Governor Quee came one year, or one time. It's been a lot of fun to highlight our Liberty Bell. Ultimately, what City of Bells would like to do is get all of the bells in the U.S. and territory ringing. Most of them are located, at the seat of government. Some are in places where nobody can see them or have any idea that they're there. But Again, these bells are indestructible and they're beautiful, and in my opinion, they should be ringing. We have a lot to celebrate. The next bell ringing activity will be Veterans Day. So on Veterans Day, we ring the bells 11 times at 11 a.m., and we'll have speakers and music. I think the Norwegian Glee Club is coming in November to sing, and I'm not sure about the speakers, but we'll keep you posted. St. Mary's Catholic Church in New Trier. You're probably wondering, why is this picture up here? New Trier was an early settlement. I think it was a settlement before Minnesota became a state. But anyway, they have the oldest bells in Minnesota, 1868 and one in 1874. They are the oldest bells that have been continually rung. So just think how many years that is. It's incredible. In the early days of City of Bells, Don and I and others were meeting with Gethsemane Episcopal Church downtown Minneapolis. They too have bells, 3 bells about that vintage, but they haven't been continually played. I wasn't brave enough to go up in that tower. It required getting up on a ladder. Don, did you get up on the ladder? I can't remember. But the bells are just fine. And they're sitting on big wooden beams that are the same age, and they're fine. The church is no longer operating, I guess you would say. The diocese owns it, but we don't know of any plans for those bells. But it would be really fun to hear them again and put them in motion. We've talked about our community bell ringing. It was May 17th of 2016, I think, that we convened a group, including Philip Brunell, a leader from the Minneapolis Convention Center, and some other downtown churches together, and said, we have this great asset. What can we do with this? So we met, and Philip Brunell, of course, brilliant thinker and creative thinker, said, don't do too many. Why don't we do 4? Why don't we do 4 community bell ringing events a year? So we decided on New Year's Day, Memorial Day, 4th of July, and then Veterans Day. So that's what we rolled out. And then we came to realize that January 1 is a very cold day to be out ringing bells. So we decided that we would not ring the Liberty Bell on January 1. All the other mostly churches, could ring their bells. But then this last year, we added Juneteenth. So now we're actually physically ringing the Liberty Bell on Memorial Day, Juneteenth, 4th of July, and Veterans Day. So it's been very fun. Another little fun situation is that when Osmo Vanska came to town, I invited him to join Central Lutheran Church, and he joined Central, and so we became friends. And I told him one day that my big dream is that someday there would be an outdoor concert on PV Plaza with the Minnesota Orchestra, and then all the bells ringing. And he said, I like that idea. So we got to work on that. And I think we're supposed to do it in 2020. Of course, we all know what happened in 2020. So it didn't happen then, it didn't happen the next year, but it happened in 2022. So it was the Day of Music, which is their summer event. We did tours of bells, we did concerts with handbells and carillon throughout the day, and then that evening they did the concert outdoors on the PV Plaza, and the last piece was Gates of Kiev. And then at the end, all the bells, particularly downtown, rang. It was just glorious, just glorious. And a great introduction for the community to all the bells that we have here. They liked it so much that we went back this year and did it again, and we hope that this will be a continuing partnership. You may know too, if you're orchestra attendees, that the orchestra was gifted 2 large bells, also from the Picard foundry, and I think they've used them a few times. They have to store them off-site. They're on a trailer. They're not in a tower or anything, but I think we'll be hearing more about their bells too, and they'll be using them more. So all very fun. Before Westminster had their bell, bells installed, and they were doing some fundraising for their bells. We did a little benefit recital at Westminster that called the Tintinnabulation of Bells. And because of the relationship that Don and Marion have with Philip, invited him to put this concert together. And he and Maria Jetty put on just a fabulous 1-hour program, everything to do with bells. And you might want to talk to Philip and have that done here. I'm going to pass this around.
Are you ready for Q&A pretty quick, pretty soon? Or?
So that's a little bit about City of Bells, and we'll keep you informed of events coming up, but as you're driving around town, listen for bells, because they're just glorious. I think when I hear bells, it's like God is saying to me, Rebecca, all is well, all will be well, I am with you, I am in the community. And that's how I hear bells, and it's been just an incredible blessing. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, that was fun. Well, we have a few minutes for Q&A questions. I'm not sure this is working. Is it working? Okay, good. Then I'll hand it to people.
Okay.
Look, I think Tom's hand was up first.
So the bells are basically indestructible, other than Liberty Bell, which cracked. But I would imagine that the structural work can make bells unplayable. I'm wondering, is in your surveys, if you found many Twin City churches which have bells which cannot be played, and what you do with those.
Very good question. The question is about bells that need to be repaired, or bells that has some structural issues. Yes, and we have primarily churches call us often because they have bells, but like you said, the framework is not working, and it's not a priority to get it repaired. So that is some of our work, is to lead them to places that can do the repair work, and ultimately our goal would be to have all of the bells working. Good question. John.
Okay. You talked about all the bells being bronze. Has anybody tried bells of other metals? Do they work? Do they just not achieve the same purity of tone? Why aren't other metals used?
You know, your own Larry Johnson has made bells out of different metals. I think he was able to get a state arts grant one year. You can ask Larry about the details, but they have tried making them out of other metals. And I don't know. You know, there's a difference between the difference in sound between the Picard bells and the company in Netherlands called Icebots. The Icebot bells have a brighter tone to them. Picard bells tend to have a warmer tone, and that seems to be more pleasing to committees choosing bells around town, I guess.
So I have a question about the City Hall bells. I'm so sad to hear that the carillon there passed away. I used to work in Government Center before the pandemic, and I looked forward every summer to the bell concerts that would happen. And my question is, are those concerts still happening? Are there other people who are able to play the City Hall bells, or are those bells now quiet? Thank
you for the question. Tony had, I think, 2 subs that he could call on if he needed to be away, but I haven't been able to connect with anybody there who knows what the plan is going to be. It is interesting. I did play it one time, and it's about 15 notes, and it looks like a typewriter. So as you can imagine, only certain types of music. But way up in the tower, Tony had a tall file just full of music books. So he did so much study on what was going to be appropriate music for certain days. It was really fun. I'll keep you posted on what's going to happen with City Hall bells.
Any more questions? Do you have any closing comments? Otherwise, we can, I guess it's almost time to end.
Just so grateful to have the opportunity to talk about bells, and as you can tell, we're enthused, and we want to share that enthusiasm and that awareness with others too, because they're tremendous gifts, millions of dollars worth of musical instruments in our community and state that we want to preserve and make sure that are celebrated. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you. That was that was amazing. I learned a lot. And that concludes our second Sunday summer series. Summer's over already. So after Rally Day, we will resume weekly forums. The Sunday after Rally Day, which is September 17, our ministers will speak to us. So that's like about a month from now. And then the week after that, Sunday the 24th, we will be commemorating the month of September being Recovery Month. So we have a speaker for that. And onward from there. So thank you for coming and thank you for being here, both of you. This was a very worthwhile presentation. Thank you.